The light in the chamber was cold and unforgiving, a pale imitation of the sun that did little to warm the sterile air. It was a light meant for examination, for the meticulous study of maps and documents, not for comfort. Lyra stood perfectly, still within its glow, her posture a testament to a lifetime of discipline. Before her, on a polished obsidian table, lay a single dossier. Its cover was unmarked, but she knew its contents without having to read them. She had been summoned here for one purpose. The man who stood opposite her was a silhouette against the vast arched window, his features hardened by years of command. He was known simply as the Preceptor, the highest authority within the Order of the Silver Blade. His voice, when he spoke, was as measured and precise as the machinery that powered their fortress. "The Blackwood Ridge pack grows bold," he stated, his fingers tracing a line on a large parchment map. "Their incursions into settled territories are no longer sporadic acts of predation. They are calculated. They are a declaration of war." Lyra's gaze remained fixed ahead, absorbing the information without reaction. She had heard the reports. Livestock slaughtered, stores raided, and the chilling, unanswered disappearance of a border patrol. The work of beasts, their alpha is the source of this corruption, the Preceptor continued, his tone dripping with contempt. "Kaelen, he is not like the feral creatures we usually call. He possesses a cruel intelligence. He commands loyalty through fear and savagery. He is the beast that must be put down for the pack to fracture." He finally turned and pushed the dossier toward her. Lyra opened it. A grainy photograph was clipped to the first page. It showed a man, or the shape of one, emerging from the deep shadows of a forest. His features were harsh, starkly angular, and his eyes, even in the poor resolution, seemed to hold a feral light that looked straight through the paper. Beneath the image was a list of attributes, an inventory of monstrosity, strength, speed, a predilection for violence. He was a specimen of perfect terror. "Your mission is clear," the Preceptor said. "Infiltrate the Blackwood territory. Confirm the Alpha's movements and patterns. Then, terminate him. You are our finest instrument, Lyra. Do not falter." Lyra closed the dossier. A quiet certainty settled within her, as familiar and comfortable as the weight of her weapons. "I understand. The abomination will be eradicated." She was dismissed with a nod. In the armory, she prepared with ritualistic care. She checked the balance of her twin blades, their edges honed to a lethal sharpness and lightly coated with a solution that held flecks of pure silver. She filled small, labeled vials with wolfsbane extract, a poison that could drop a full-grown wolf in its tracks. Each item was a verse in a prayer she had memorized long ago, a prayer for the cleansing of the world from the scourge of lycanthropy. She had been chosen for this duty as a child, taken in by the Order after her family was torn apart by a rogue werewolf. They had given her a purpose. They had given her a truth. Werewolves were monsters, creatures of base instinct and uncontrollable rage. They were a sickness upon the earth, and she was the cure. Her heart, encased in ice, beat only for the moment her blade found its mark in the heart of a beast. As the gates of the fortress ground open, she stepped out into the fading afternoon. Before her lay the world, and her path led directly into the dark embrace of the Blackwood. She did not look back. There was no need. Her faith was absolute, her resolve unshakable. She was Lyra, hunter of the Order of the Silver Blade, and she moved toward a singular, righteous goal. Justice delivered by her hand. The border of Blackwood was not marked by any fence or stone, but by a feeling. The air changed the moment Lyra passed the first ancient, gnarled oak. It grew thick and heavy, laden with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, something primal and entirely foreign. It was the smell of raw power, a musk that spoke of territory and dominance. It was the smell of him, the Alpha. She noted it clinically, filing it away as a tactical data point. The stronger the scent, the closer she was to the heart of the beast's domain. She moved with a silence that was second nature, her boots making no sound on the thick carpet of pine needles. The forest was a cathedral of towering trees and deep, shifting shadows. Sunlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy above, casting the world below in a perpetual, gloomy twilight. It was a place of profound silence, but not an empty one. It was a watchful silence. The hair on the back of her neck prickled with the unshakable sensation that the woods themselves were aware of her intrusion. Her training dictated she find evidence of the pack's monstrosity, and she did. She came across the carcass of a stag, torn apart with brutal efficiency. The kill was fresh, the blood still dark and wet on the moss. The force required to rend the animal so completely was terrifying, a clear testament to the savage strength she was hunting. It was exactly what the order had described. She touched the silver hilt of her knife, her resolve hardening, but the forest insisted on showing her another story, one that did not align with the dossier's neat narrative. A little way off from the kill site, she found a small, carefully tended patch of wild mint and yarrow, the plants organized with clear intention. Further on, nestled between the roots of a giant cedar, was a small, playful den woven from fallen branches, clearly the work of a child or a pup. She observed from a distance as two young wolves tumbled over each other in a mock fight, their play accompanied by soft yips, not savage snarls. This dissonance was a quiet nuisance, a fly buzzing at the edge of her concentration. Monsters did not tend healing herbs. Beasts did not build playful dens for their young. She pushed the thoughts aside. They were distractions, clever mimicry of civilization designed to lower her guard. The order had warned her of their cunning. For 2 days, she tracked him, following the trail of his pervasive scent and the signs of his pack's movement. It led her deeper into the mountains, to a place where the cliffs overlooked a misty valley. And there, she found his lair. It was not a cave. It was the ruins of a manor house. The structure was a skeleton of blackened stone and scorched timbers, a testament to some great and violent fire. But its grandeur was undeniable. The lines of the foundation spoke of a vast home, the broken windows framed with intricate stonework that hinted at a past elegance. Ivy climbed the walls, weaving through the scars, a gentle attempt by nature to reclaim and heal the wound. Lyra stood in the shadow of the ruins, her cold certainty faltering for the first time. This was not the den of a mindless animal. This was a place of history, of tragedy. This was a place someone had once called home. The image from her dossier of a feral monster, blurred and then shattered against the reality of these fire-scarred stones. A low, quiet thrum of doubt began to pulse in time with her heartbeat, a rhythm entirely at odds with the mission she had been sent to complete. She pushed the feeling down, deep down. The full moon would rise soon. She would hide within these very ruins, and she would wait for the beast to show its true face. She would fulfill her purpose. She had to. The full moon ascended, a perfect, cold coin of silver in the obsidian sky. Its light poured into the ruins of the great hall, painting the broken stones in shades of bone and ink. Lyra waited in the deepest pool of shadow, her body coiled, every sense honed to a razor's edge. The air grew thick, charged with a palpable energy that made her skin hum. It was the moon's power, calling to the monster she was here to kill. She breathed slowly, her fingers resting on the cool, familiar hilts of her knives. This was the moment. The beast would come, and she would be ready. He did not come with a roar. He did not come as a wolf. He simply emerged from the forest line and stepped into the center of the moonlit hall as a man. Kaelen. The photograph in her dossier had been a pale ghost of his true presence. He was taller, broader, his body a landscape of corded muscle and old power barely contained by simple, worn trousers. His skin was pale in the moonlight, mapped with the silver traces of old scars. He moved with an unnerving, predatory grace, each step silent and deliberate. This was not a mindless creature. This was a sovereign in his ruined kingdom. He stopped and turned slowly, his head lifted as if tasting the air. Lyra held her breath, becoming one with the stone. It was futile. "You can come out, little hunter." His voice was a low rumble, a sound that seemed to originate from the earth itself. It vibrated through the soles of her boots and settled deep in her bones. It was calm, knowing, and held no trace of the beastly rage she had been promised. "I have smelled the silver and ambition on you since you crossed into my land." The words were a physical blow to her training. Stealth was her greatest weapon, and he had stripped it from her with casual ease. Pride and a flicker of fear forced her from the shadows. She stepped into the moonlight, a silver dagger held ready in each hand. She was Lyra of the Order, and she would face her quarry with purpose. "Alpha Kaelen," she said, her voice colder than the night air. "The Order of the Silver Blade has sent me to deliver justice." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and his gaze was nothing like she expected. His eyes were not the feral, murderous orbs from the photograph. They were ancient, intelligent, and held a depth of sorrow so profound it felt like looking into a starless night. A faint, dangerous smile touched his lips, a flash of white in the gloom. "The Order?" he repeated, the words laced with a bitterness that was old and weary. The same order that set fire to this house while my family slept inside? The same order that murders children for the crime of their bloodline? Their justice is a poison, and you are their vessel. The accusation was so monstrous, so contrary to everything she knew, that it momentarily stole her breath. The order was protection. The order was light. You lie, she hissed, but the words sounded brittle, unconvincing even to her own ears. Do I? He asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more intimidating than a shout. He took a single step closer, and the space between them crackled with tension. They told you I am a mindless beast. Did they tell you why my pack raids their stores? It is to feed the orphans, both human and wolf, that they created that night. They told you I attack without cause. They did not tell you they struck first, that they burned our home to the ground for the sin of existing too peacefully, too close to their precious settlements. He did not advance further, but his presence seemed to expand, filling the entire ruin. He was dismantling her world with each calm, measured sentence. The foundation of her faith, so absolute mere moments ago, began to crack and splinter. The image of the playful pups, the tended herbs, the scorched stones of this very house, all coalesced into a terrible, looming picture of a truth she had never been allowed to see. Her knives felt suddenly heavy and foolish in her hands, the silver, cold and alien against her skin. She was not a bringer of justice. She was a ghost, haunting a tragedy she did not understand, sent by the very architects of its pain. The world narrowed to the space between them, a gulf of moonlight and shattered beliefs. Lyra's mind, a fortress of doctrine and discipline, was under a siege more devastating than any physical attack. The walls were crumbling, and the cold certainty that had been her compass was melting into a terrifying void. Her knives remained raised, but the will behind them was fracturing. She was a weapon without a target, a hunter whose prey had just revealed itself to be the wrong king. Kaelen watched her internal unraveling, his head tilted with an unnerving perception. He did not gloat. He did not rage. He simply observed the collapse of her reality with a patience that spoke of immense age and profound loss. He took a single step forward, then another, closing the distance she had meant to keep between hunter and quarry. Her training screamed at her to strike, to lunge, to fulfill her purpose. Her body refused to obey. He moved then, a blur of motion so fast her eyes could not track it. One moment he was several paces away, the next he was directly before her, his presence overwhelming every sense. The heat of his body radiated against her skin. The scent of him, pine and night air and wild, powerful musk, filled her lungs. His hand, large and calloused, closed around her wrist. His grip was not cruel, but it was absolute, an unbreakable circle of warmth and strength. A jolt like a lightning strike traveled up her arm, searing through her veins. It was not pain. It was an awakening, a shocking, electric current that bypassed all reason and spoke directly to a part of her soul she never knew existed. Her silver dagger clattered on the ancient stone floor, the sound absurdly loud in the tense silence. The sound of her purpose hitting rock bottom. He did not release her. He used his hold to draw her closer, his head dipping toward her neck. She was frozen, a statue of conflict and confusion. This was the moment a beast would tear out her throat. Instead, she felt the warmth of his breath against her skin as he inhaled deeply. The intimacy of the act was more paralyzing than any threat of violence. A low, resonant sound built in his chest, a rumble that was felt more than heard. It was not a growl of menace. It was a sound of revelation. He went perfectly still for a heartbeat, then slowly raised his head. His eyes, when they met hers, were blazing with a soft amber light that held her captive. The ancient sorrow in them was now mingled with something else, something awestruck and terrifyingly possessive. They told you many lies, little hunter, he murmured, his voice a low vibration that thrummed through her very core. But the greatest lie they told was the one they buried deep inside you. They did not tell you that the blood of a werewolf hunter is often laced with the very thing they hunt. A failsafe, a cruel joke, a way to create the perfect weapon, one that understands its prey on a primal level. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She tried to form a denial, but no sound emerged. She could only stare into his glowing eyes, drowning in their intensity. He leaned in again, his voice dropping to a whisper that was for her alone. Your fear, it does not smell like human fear. It is rich. It is wild. It smells like an unmated she-wolf, lost and confused in a world that told her she was something else. The words landed not in her mind, but in her blood. They ignited a truth that had been sleeping within her cells her entire life. The strange pull she felt toward him, the electric shock of his touch, the way her body responded not with revulsion but with a terrifying, eager curiosity. It was not a trick. It was not his power over her. It was her own power, her own nature, roaring to the surface after a lifetime of suppression. They sent you to me not to kill me, Lyra, he said, his name on his lips a caress that felt more familiar than her own. They sent you to be claimed. The finality of it, the horrifying liberating truth of it, shattered the last of her resistance. The second knife slipped from her numb fingers, joining its twin on the stone. She was empty. She was full. She was nothing she had been taught, and everything she was meant to be. The hunter was gone. In her place stood a woman, naked and trembling. Before her destiny, finally hearing the song of her own blood, silence descended, profound and absolute. It was not the quiet of the forest or the stillness of the night. It was the silence of a universe holding its breath. The clatter of the second silver knife against the stone floor was the final note of a finished song, the end of the life she had known. Lyra stood empty-handed, her weapons gone, her mission dissolved into the moonlight. The rigid framework of her identity, so carefully constructed by the Order, lay in pieces at her feet. She was untethered, adrift in a sea of terrifying possibility. Kaelen did not move. His grip on her wrist gentled, his thumb tracing a slow, deliberate arc over her racing pulse. The gesture was not one of restraint, but of connection. He was an anchor in her swirling storm, his eyes, glowing with that soft, preternatural light, watched her, seeing not the hunter, not the weapon, but the woman emerging from the ruins of a lie. He saw her fear, her confusion, and the first, fragile spark of awakening. Your order built you of ice and stone, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. They gave you a purpose carved from hatred, but beneath that, your blood sings a different song, one of fire and earth and pack. He took a half-step closer, erasing the last inches between them. The heat of his body was a brand. The scent of him, wild and essential, was the only air she wanted to breathe. They told you this was a curse. They were wrong. This is belonging. This is coming home. He raised his other hand, his movements slow and deliberate, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not. She could not. His fingers, surprisingly gentle, came to rest against her cheek. His touch was electric, a current that melted the last remnants of the ice around her heart. It was a touch that promised not violence, but possession, not ownership, but devotion. The fight is over, little hunter, he whispered, his face so close she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. You do not have to be their weapon any longer. Be mine instead. The choice was laid before her, not as a demand, but as an offering, a future. She could cling to the shattered ghost of her old life, to the cold certainty of a truth that had been poisoned at its root, or she could step into the terrifying, unknown warmth of this new world. She looked into the eyes of the monster she was sent to destroy and saw not a beast, but a king, not an abomination, but her destiny. She saw strength and sorrow, and a lonely power that called out to the same lonely power now stirring within her. A single, clear thought crystallized in the chaos of her mind. This was not surrender. This was acceptance. Her breath hitched. She gave him the only answer that mattered. She tilted her head, a slow, deliberate movement of trust that felt more natural than any battle stance she had ever taken. She bared the column of her throat to him, exposing the vulnerable skin where her pulse beat a frantic, eager rhythm. It was an invitation, a yielding, a prayer. A low, approving growl resonated in his chest, a sound that spoke of ancient rituals and primal satisfaction. He bent his head. His lips were warm against her skin, a soft press that made her tremble. Then came the sharp, swift pain of his teeth. It was a bright, searing instant that vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a wave of pure, blinding pleasure so intense it stole the breath from her lungs. It was not the pain of a wound. It was the pain of a seed cracking open, of something new and powerful bursting into life. A golden warmth flooded her veins, spreading from the mark on her neck to the very tips of her fingers and toes. It was his essence, his power, his soul, weaving itself into the fabric of her being. The world did not just sharpen, it opened. She could feel the rustle of every leaf in the forest, hear the heartbeat of a rabbit in its burrow far below, smell the history in the very stones around them. And beneath it all, a new, profound awareness bloomed in her mind, a second consciousness. Fierce and protective and utterly devoted. Kaelen, the bond snapped into place, irrevocable and complete. She was no longer just Lyra. She was claimed. She was his. And as the ecstasy of the claiming crest and began to ebb into a deep, thrumming contentment, she knew with a certainty that dwarfed any she had ever felt before that he was hers as well. The monster was hers. The alpha was hers, and she was finally wholly free. Lyra woke to a new world. It was not the world of sharp edges and cold certainty she had known before. This world was a symphony of sensation, a tapestry woven from threads of scent, sound, and feeling so vivid it was almost overwhelming. She lay on a bed of furs in a chamber that was part of the ruined manor, its walls open to the sky, but somehow, feeling more like a sanctuary than any fortified room in the Order's keep. The first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold, and she could see each individual color with a clarity that made her breath catch. She could hear the dew dripping from a leaf outside, the rustle of a field mouse in the grass 100 paces away, the distant murmur of the pack beginning to stir, and she could feel him. Kaelen was a steady, warm presence in the back of her mind, a quiet hum of awareness that was as natural and essential as her own heartbeat. He was nearby, a pillar of calm strength, and the simple knowledge of his proximity filled her with a sense of security so profound it brought unexpected tears to her eyes. This was the mate bond. It was not a chain. It was a root system, deep and interconnected, making her part of something greater than herself. He entered the chamber silently, his form filling the broken archway. In the soft morning light, he looked less like the terrifying beast of her dossier and more like a warrior. King, weary from a long reign, but unbroken. His eyes found hers, and the amber in them glowed with a soft, possessive warmth. He did not speak. He simply came to her, knelt beside the furs, and pressed his forehead to hers. The connection flared, a wave of pure, undiluted affection flowing from him to her, and she understood. This was their language now. Words were often unnecessary. The days that followed were a lesson in unlearning and rebirth. Her body, once a tool honed for efficiency and killing, was now a vessel for a wild, new power. Emotions, once locked away, now crashed over her with the force of a tidal wave. She felt the pack's wariness as a physical chill, their flickers of hostility, like tiny pinpricks against her skin. She felt their curiosity, their hope, their deep-seated fear of the silver they smelled on her. It was a cacophony she had to learn to navigate. Kaelen was her guide, his patience endless. He taught her to shield her mind, to separate the pack's emotions from her own. He showed her how to listen to the forest, to understand the language of the wind and the warnings in the scent carried upon it. He walked with her through the territory, not as a hunter, but as its protector, pointing out the dens of families, both human and wolf, that his pack sheltered. She saw the orphans now, their eyes wide as they watched the fearsome hunter who now walked beside their alpha. She saw the truth of his words etched in their thin faces and the careful way they were tended to by the pack. Her old skills did not vanish. They transformed. Her hunter's stealth became a Luna's grace. Her knowledge of tactics and strategy became a tool for planning patrols and protecting borders. She began to use her intimate understanding of the Order not to serve them, but to defend against them. She suggested weaknesses in their approaches, predicted their movements. Slowly, tentatively, she began to earn not just the pack's tolerance, but their respect, and through it all, she and Kaelen grew together. Their bond deepened from a shocking connection into a profound and passionate love. Their conversations were a blend of spoken word and shared feeling, a dance of two souls learning each other's rhythms. In the quiet of their chamber under the stars, he told her of his family, of the beauty that had been lost the night the Order came. She told him of her own loneliness, of the cold purpose that had been her only companion. They were two halves of a whole, their scars and their strengths aligning perfectly. Lyra the hunter was a ghost, a memory. Lyra, the Luna, was being born, forged in the warmth of his love and the challenging reality of her new life. She was learning that true strength was not found in a silver blade, but in the courage to protect what you love. And she was coming to love this broken, beautiful pack and their fierce, devoted alpha with every fiber of her newly awakened soul. A new rhythm had settled over Lyra's life, a harmony woven from the deep, constant hum of the mate bond and the vibrant, sometimes chaotic chorus of the pack. She was no longer an outsider looking in. She was the heart of this wild, scarred family, their Luna. She walked with Kaelen, not as a shadow, but as his equal, her presence a quiet command that the pack had learned to trust and respect. The ruins of the manor felt less like a monument to a past tragedy and more like the foundation for a hopeful future. For a handful of peaceful days, she allowed herself to believe that future was possible. The warning came not with a shout, but as a sudden, sharp tension in the bond she shared with Kaelen. His head snapped up from where he was mending a fishing net, his eyes flashing molten gold. A moment later, a young sentry, still in his human form, burst into the clearing, his chest heaving. "They are here," the boy gasped, his eyes wide, with a fear that was instantly contagious. "A full contingent, silver and steel. They are at the eastern ridge." The peace shattered. The air grew thick with the scent of rising panic. Whines and nervous growls rippled through the pack. This was not a lone hunter. This was an army, and they had come to finish what they started years ago. Lyra felt a coldness seep into her veins. But it was not the cold of fear. It was the cold, focused clarity of the hunter she had once been, now tempered and given purpose by the love she now fought for. She looked at Kaelen, and in that single glance, an entire strategy was communicated. There was no need for words. Their souls were aligned in a single, unwavering purpose. Protect. Kaelen threw back his head and unleashed a howl that shook the very trees. It was not a sound of despair, but a call to battle, a rallying cry that spoke of defiance and home. It was answered immediately by the pack, a symphony of rising courage that drowned out the fear. The battle was a storm of chaos and fury. It erupted along the tree line, a brutal collision of order, steel, and primal strength. Lyra fought, but she did not fight alone. She was a whirlwind of motion, her old lethal grace now enhanced by her new instincts. She moved in perfect, preternatural sync with Kaelen. He would break a hunter's formation with a powerful charge, and she would be there to disarm the one who tried to strike his flank. She anticipated his movements as if they were her own, her knives finding their marks not in the hearts of beasts, but in the arms and legs of the men who sought to murder her family. She saw the preceptor then, directing his forces from the rear, his face a mask of cold fury. Seeing him here, in her home, threatening her mate, her pack, her children, ignited a final, cleansing rage. The last vestige of the order's hold on her soul burned away in that fire. She strode toward him, through the melee, her gaze locked on his. "Preceptor," she called out, her voice ringing clear above the clash of battle. He turned, his eyes widening in disbelief and contempt. "Traitorous wretch, you have embraced the filth they made you from. I have embraced the truth you tried to bury," she countered, her voice steady and strong. "I am not your weapon. I am not your victim. I am Lyra, Luna of the Blackwood Ridge. Pack, and you are not welcome here." His face twisted, and he raised a silver-tipped blade. But before he could take a step, a shadow fell over him. Kaelen stood at Lyra's side, his form radiating a protective fury so immense it forced the preceptor to stumble back. Together, Alpha and Luna stood before him, a united front. Their combined power was a tangible force, a wall that his hatred could not breach. The fight seemed to drain from the man as he saw his hunters being subdued, his mission a catastrophic failure. The battle ended not with a glorious final blow, but with the retreat of a broken enemy. The order, leaderless and demoralized, fled back into the forest from which they came. Silence returned to Blackwood, heavy with the scent of blood and triumph. Lyra stood amidst her pack, her body aching, her heart full. She looked at Kaelen, at the proud, fierce love in his eyes, and she knew this was not just a victory. It was a reckoning. They had faced the past and reclaimed their future. They were no longer the hunted or the hunters. They were the guardians, the protectors. As the moon rose, washing the clearing in its gentle light, Kaelen wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She leaned into his strength, and he into hers. They were two halves of a whole, a king and his queen, bound by a love that had conquered a lifetime of lies. They stood together, watching over their pack, their home, their hard-won peace. The story of the monster and the hunter was over. Their story, the story of the Alpha and his Luna, had just begun. The end.